Well, let's begin tonight with the aftermath of Hurricane Ian. Parts of Florida are still taking stock of the destruction, and some Floridians are clearly still processing what they just survived.
When they were just about ready to take her out, they said, "You don't want to see this." And I said, "You're right. You're right."
Floating for
3 days.
3 days.
Water came up to about here, and when it got to there, the way they were saying on the news, I thought it was going to eventually go over our heads. I called my daughters and said goodbye.
It was very traumatic. I went into the water and saved 3 people, and I lost one friend. I couldn't save her. She got washed away.
The devastation's unbelievable. You know, I was a paramedic fireman for 25 years, and it's just unbelievable.
Ian has killed at least 100 people in Florida and 4 in North Carolina. Meanwhile, search and rescue teams have retrieved at least 1,900 people. Only about 5% of Floridians are still without power, but that's 500,000 people in the dark. And utility officials say some of them might not get reconnected until about this weekend. NBC Shaquille Brewster starts us off tonight from Fort Myers, Florida, with more. Shaq, how is the rescue effort going so far?
Well, when you hear from FEMA and local officials, the priority right now is still that search and rescue mission. And that's part of the reason why here in Fort Myers Beach, for example, it's completely closed off to citizens. Folks can't go in to see their businesses or see their homes because FEMA crews want to go through house by house where doors exist, door by door, making sure that they've recovered everyone, that they've been able to rescue everyone, and in many cases, unfortunately, as we watch that death toll increase, recover those who were lost in the storm. So they have a historic mobilization. We're talking about 1,300 FEMA personnel on the ground, dozens of canines here to help, and also more than 100 search and rescue, urban search and rescue crews and teams who are here trying to bring these or find more people and bring this search to a conclusion. But right now, the priority, if you listen to what you're hearing from FEMA, is still on that search and rescue mission, Joshua.
What are you hearing from some of the evacuees, Shaq, particularly people who can't get back close to where their homes are or their businesses are? How are they doing? I mean, are they trying to kind of stay in the area nearby, or does it seem like people have just kind of left town and they'll come back when they can completely get back to where they were?
Yeah, it's a lot of people leaving town. There are many people in shelters. I mean, there's an actual checkpoint at the entrance on one of the major roads into this island. And there were some moments yesterday, some of our teams who were here yesterday, they were talking about how at that checkpoint, people would show up with their identification, say, I live just a a mile down the road. And there was frustration that they couldn't get in. But again, FEMA, they've been saying they want to go through this process. There's so many people who are unidentified, who are missing at this point, and they want to be able to go through the entire island and make sure that they're able to recover everyone who's still left behind. So there's a lot of understanding in that regard, in that the work needs to be done, but definitely frustration as many people want to start that rebuilding process.
Yeah, and frankly, I can kind of understand why they're being kept out. Having had to deal with the aftermath of a hurricane at my home, who knows what the roads are like, if they're even passable, or they're down power lines, or just the danger of walking around in a hurricane zone can be really enough to set your teeth on edge. One of the other issues, though, with the cleanup came up in a conversation between Ali Velshi and a resident of Fort Myers. Here is part of what Ali Velshi heard. Watch.
I don't want to say it, but you know, they're worried about Sanibel, and, you know, God bless them, they earn their money and everything, you know. But you fly around here and you look at this devastation right here, nobody's worried about us little people that don't make $1 million a year. I do good to make $25,000 a year. We've just got we don't know who to call. Nobody's come down here, no officials, you know, have come down and said, okay, we can get this or whatever, you know. I mean, I said, you're the second reporters I've talked to since yesterday.
Shaq, what sense do we have of whether there are, and I'm sure there are to some extent, but in terms of the class divide that shrimper talked about, you know, Sanibel Island, Captiva Island, they're going to be all right, right? Some of the people who live there are wealthy enough to just walk away from the homes and count them as losses. That's happened in past hurricanes. What about that class divide in terms of making sure everyone gets the help they need, regardless of their tax bracket?
Well, it definitely seems like there's that gap that is persistent there. And you look at this, and yeah, many of the images that you see are the boats that are washed ashore or that are on land off to the side of the road, because those are dramatic pictures. But we've been going around Fort Myers Beach area in Fort Myers, and you see many trailer home parks that are completely damaged. I was in a neighborhood, and every house had items pulled out of it: mattresses, dressers, televisions. Just, it seemed as if their entire house was on the lawn there, ready to be picked up by trash removal. And then you still had people mingling about in that area, going around trying to, you know, get on with their lives, washing their clothes, washing off different items in their front lawn. So yes, there is definitely going to be that divide there. We also know when you talk about insurance, it's insurance premiums, especially in the state of Florida, have gone up well before this storm. Many people got rid of their insurance costs because they were struggling to maintain their business. They were struggling to pay their mortgage, so they didn't have that flood insurance, even though it might have been recommended for that area. So it's another example of those who are struggling the most when something like this happens, when that devastation comes. They are going to get hit harder, and it's going to make that recovery a little bit longer for many of them.
For sure. Thank you, Shaq. That's NBC Shaquille Brewster starting us off tonight from Fort Myers. And to that man's point that we heard, if you are in Southwest Florida and looking for info, floridadisaster.org is the state's official website that has all of that disaster recovery info in one place, floridadisaster.org. Let's pick up with the point that Shaq was making about insurance, because cleaning up after Hurricane Ian is one challenge in Florida's recovery, but paying for it all, that could be just as hard, if not harder. The analytics company CoreLogic estimates that Florida's private property insured losses could reach $47 billion. That would make it Florida's most expensive storm ever. Ian hit after the state's insurance market was already strapped. A dozen companies in Florida have gone out of business since January of 2020. 6 of them were deemed insolvent just this year. So how much should victims of Hurricane Ian expect their insurers to help rebuild their lives? Let's continue now with CNBC correspondent Contessa Brewer with more on that. Contessa, explain to us the kind of condition that Florida's insurance industry is in. How did things get so rough?
You know, after Hurricane Ian hit Puerto Rico, I reported that the state of Florida's insurance market is its own special kind of hell. The amount that people pay for their home insurance is 3 times the national average. We know that there have been more than a dozen insurance companies that have left the state of Florida because it's simply not profitable to operate there. Litigation is sky high. Even though Florida accounts for only 9% of property claims, its lawsuits around property claims account for almost 80% nationally. The laws in Florida make it very easy for litigators to go and press lawsuits, and the settlements and the verdicts have driven up the price of insurance. That and regulators have controlled the price of insurance premiums so that it's unprofitable for these insurance companies. It just does not work. What we've seen is that the state has turned to Citizens. That's the insurer of last resort. And what has happened is their number of policies has doubled over the last 5 years. But Citizens did not fully get reinsurance for the hurricane season. It said it was too expensive. So it got some, but it didn't get as much as it was hoping for. So what we could see is that people who've had Citizens insurance, the last resort insurer, could end up paying surcharges because of the scope of this tragedy that we've seen hit in Florida. It's been a mess, and this was even before Ian hit. Now Ian, and you saw there, CoreLogic says as much as $47 billion in private property insured losses. So take out of that anybody who doesn't have insurance, take out of that the infrastructure that now needs to be replaced, and you've got a real crisis on your hands in Florida.
Yeah, Citizens Property Insurance, which, you know, a lot of people on my street where I grew up in South Florida ended up in Citizens after some of the hurricanes we had more than 15 years ago. This was an insurance company that didn't even have staff adjusters. That's how small Citizens Property Insurance was. They had to staff up to deal with the influx of people, and now they've had another one. So this is definitely kind of a crisis on top of a disaster. But then add to that the issue with flood insurance. There's an actuarial firm called Milliman that says that only about a fifth of homes in the counties where there were evacuation orders have flood insurance. A fifth of the homes with flood insurance. So what happens to the remaining 81.5% of people? What happens to them?
Okay, so I want to be clear that if you live in a designated flood zone, so for instance, in Manhattan, I live in flood zone 1, I am required by my mortgage carrier to have flood insurance. That's just a requirement if you live where FEMA has designated it as a flood zone. But as we know, those maps are really outdated. They're in the process of being remade. So a lot of people who lived in inland counties were not required to get flood insurance, even though what they found here was when rivers rise, when the storm drains back up, their homes flood. And while your property insurance may cover wind damage from a hurricane, it does not cover flooding. So those people will then turn to FEMA often offers assistance in these cases. We've also already heard from President Biden that there will be $37,900 for insurance gaps for the storm and an additional $37,900 for lost property. But as you know, with the price of materials and labor for a lot of this repair, that will barely scratch the surface.
So what should hurricane victims expect or do in the short term while all of this is kind of sorting itself out?
Okay, so if you have insurance, if you don't have insurance, no matter what situation you're in, everyone should be keeping track of the receipts. If you have to stay in a hotel, you keep those receipts. If you have to fill up your gas, if you have to go eat at a restaurant because your kitchen no longer works, you have to keep those receipts. And what you do is you collect all those receipts and you submit them to your insurance adjuster anyway. Even if you think, oh, well, this is flooding, you may be surprised what your insurance covers, and until you read the fine print, and it's so important to get those policies out and go over the fine print, you don't know. Then, in addition, apply for federal assistance. It's very important. I've been through this process myself. I lost my home in Hurricane Sandy. I know how onerous the paperwork can be, but it's really important at this point to collect all that paperwork, to keep good track, and to file as soon as you can to see what assistance is out there for you.
Thank you, Contessa. And that website, by the way, is disasterassistance.gov. You can go to FEMA's homepage, FEMA.gov, or you can go to disasterassistance.gov. Thank you, Contessa. That's CNBC's Contessa Brewer with the latest on Florida's insurance situation. Well, President Biden plans to visit Florida this Wednesday. Today, he was in Puerto Rico surveying the damage from Hurricane Fiona. The president promised that the federal government would do better by the island this time than it has with previous storms.
We're going to make sure you get every single dollar promised. And I'm determined to help Puerto Rico build faster than in the past and stronger and better prepared for the future.
NBC's Gabe Gutierrez is in the town of San Germán, that's in southwestern Puerto Rico. Gabe, what were some of the main promises that President Biden made in terms of what is coming to Puerto Rico, and what were some of the reactions to those promises?
Well, Joshua, the President Biden saying that there would be another $60 million set aside in new funding to shore up things like levees and a new warning system for flooding to basically ensure, his administration says, that the same type of storms, that Puerto Rico would be better protected against these types of hurricanes. But, Joshua, there is skepticism here on the ground because of previous hurricanes and communities like this one. This is San Germán in the southwestern part of the island. You see behind me, it might be tough to see because it's getting darker here, but this is a washed out bridge that the wall of water came crashing through here more than 2 weeks ago when Hurricane Fiona made landfall. We spoke with some of the residents here who said that they were trapped in their homes for at least a day. One woman telling us that she has damaged insulin and that she's been waiting on hold with FEMA for hours. So they are skeptical that the federal government will help much in this case, but the Biden administration trying to make a case for why it says that the federal government can be trusted and that there will be resources on the ground as Puerto Rico begins to slowly restore power. Luma Energy, by the way, the private company controlling power transmission, says that 93% of this island now has power back. Joshua?
Well, and it sounds also, Gabe, like the president's trying to turn the page from past recoveries, turn the page from, say, Hurricane Maria, which we know was so devastating and revealed so many problems with Puerto Rico's infrastructure and the way that the infrastructure is held up. And I hear you saying that people were skeptical of that, but it at least sounds like the president is trying to convince folks that the future will not be like the past, right?
Oh, well, absolutely right, Joshua. Now, the power grid in Puerto Rico has been an issue for much of its history, at least for decades. But you are right. The previous administration, the former Trump administration, clashed considerably with local officials here. And, you know, when President Trump visited the island following Hurricane Maria, of course, you remember that enduring image, of course, of him throwing paper towels to some Puerto Ricans here. The Puerto Ricans we spoke with do remember that. They do applaud President Biden for coming here. But again, they do feel this, you know, while they are being forced to be resilient time and time again, they feel forgotten at times by the U.S. mainland. And then they can only hope that some of these resources will be able to trickle here as it does for other parts of the United States. Of course, you know, as horrific as the damage has been in Florida and the loss of life so heartbreaking there, we saw tens of thousands of power crews lining up on standby to restore power to parts of Florida, whereas here in Puerto Rico, there were just several hundred power crews, you know, following, you know, Hurricane Fiona. So that is the type of skepticism that I'm talking about when they say they don't necessarily think the federal government and FEMA will be there for them in their time of need, Joshua.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that totally makes sense. I mean, at least with Florida, you had FPL and Duke Energy and TECO and all of the different utilities that were pre-stationed, ready to go after Ian blew through, and they kind of hit the ground running as soon as it was safe to go out. But I understand you spoke to somebody from Luma Energy, the utility on the island of Puerto Rico. What did they tell you in terms of how this time might be different?
And certainly, Joshua, you know, Luma Energy took over power transmission here on the island last year and has faced intense criticism for, you know, what many residents here say are rising energy bills and an increase in outages even before Hurricane Fiona. But we did speak with a Luma official earlier today. Again, they touted that restoration was at about 93% here in the island at this point. But they seem to point the finger at PREPA, which is the government-run utility that still handles power generation on the island, not transmission, but has had decades of allegations of corruption and certainly faced so much criticism following Hurricane Maria. Take a listen to what that Luma Energy official told me earlier today.
We've taken over a system that has been pretty much neglected for years, if not decades. And since we got here, we've been trying to rebuild as much as we can. We understand, and I have, you know, I feel for these people. We are doing everything we can to get the power back on. We will not stop until everybody's restored.
And Joshua, I should point out that right after Hurricane Fiona, actually several mayors here in Puerto Rico decided to not wait for Luma and essentially took it upon themselves to hire their own private contractors to restore power in some of their municipalities. There's about a handful of municipalities. The Luma Energy official I spoke with, you just heard from, said that they believe that that was entirely unsafe, that they did not think that was a good idea. But Joshua, it does speak to the, you know, lack of trust when it comes to Luma Energy that many Puerto Ricans feel, and that you know, some municipalities feel they have to go out alone, or else they're still going to be waiting for power to be restored for quite a long time. But Joshua, I should also point out, so far this has not been Hurricane Maria. In Hurricane Maria, as you know, there were people without power for months, even some, you know, going on a year. And while, you know, some communities like this one are still struggling and still dealing with the effects of power more than 2 weeks weeks after Hurricane Fiona, there is not the expectation here that we will see this long a power outage, anything like we saw during Hurricane Maria. But now questions are being brought up about the climate crisis and how to restore Puerto Rico's power grid in a sustainable way so that we don't keep seeing this problem in storm after storm, year after year. Joshua.
And Gabe, just in the few minutes that we've been talking, the difference in terms of the darkness behind you, how quickly it's gotten dark with the sun going down, can only imagine what it's like for folks dealing with that day to day. Hopefully this time we'll turn a page from the past. Thank you, Gabe. That's NBC's Gabe Gutierrez with the latest for us from San Germán in Puerto Rico. Still to come, opening statements in a high-profile case from the January 6th attack on Capitol Hill. And we'll break down Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's first day on the United States Supreme Court. We're glad you're with us for Now Tonight from NBC News. Five members of the far-right militia group, the Oath Keepers, including its leader, are on trial. Opening statements were today. Prosecutors say the defendants were prepared to go to war to keep Donald Trump in the presidency. The Oath Keepers leader, Stewart Rhodes, and the four members face a range of charges, including seditious conspiracy. That charge is rarely pressed in court. It dates back to the Civil War, and convictions carry a sentence of up to 20 years. Federal prosecutors argue that Mr. Rhodes and his crew treated the attack like a battle they had won. They presented audio recordings as evidence. On one recording, Mr. Rhodes apparently says that his only regret from January 6th is that the group should have brought rifles. The defense argues that Mr. Rhodes did not have any violent intent that day. NBC Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian joins us now. Ken, what were your big takeaways from this day of opening arguments?
Well, Joshua, the Justice Department really brought a lot of fire in terms of arguing that this conspiracy, this alleged conspiracy, sought to shatter a bedrock of American democracy, as one prosecutor put it. It was really an armed rebellion aimed at stopping the lawful transfer of power. It went back to the days after the November election and continued on even after January 6th. And they note that, we saw on video these two separate formations of Oath Keepers going into the Capitol in what they called stacks. The Oath Keepers had stashed guns at hotels in Virginia, where they also had what they called a quick reaction force, which was available to respond. Now, these facts are not really in dispute, and the text messages and the recordings that are in evidence in this trial, they say what they say. So the defense is left to argue about interpretation. And what they say is there was no criminal intent here. There was no violence. You're not charging any of these Oath Keepers with assaulting police officers, for example, and that's accurate. And what they say is they needed all those guns because they thought Donald Trump might invoke what's known as the Insurrection Act, and that they would serve as a militia to do Trump's bidding to overturn this corrupt election. These defense lawyers are saying these Oath Keepers legitimately believe that, and therefore they didn't commit a crime. Now we'll have to see what this Washington, D.C. jury decides, Joshua, and this trial is expected to take about a month.
Ken, everyone's entitled to their day in court. These men are innocent until proven guilty, of course. But I have to say there's a common bond through some of these trials, at least to me, that on one hand you have prosecutors with an array of evidence, whether it's audio files or emails or documents or other things, to try to clearly show some kind of criminal intent connected to January 6th. And then defense attorneys making an argument that is a various permutation of, like that feels like it's the entire argument, that we're overblowing this. It's not as bad as people think. It wasn't all of that. It was something much more minor. Am I missing something in terms of the tone of this Oath Keepers argument? It sounds like they're trying to tell us not to believe our lion eyes.
I think you've nailed it, Joshua. You really have. I mean, in the defense, what the Oath Keepers have going for them, I think, is that they are not the most violent of the January 6th defendants. They are not the ones that assaulted police officers on video with flagpoles or other kinds of weapons. They were much more disciplined, actually, which makes them, to some people, scarier, because they had a mission. One of the stack formations was going into the Capitol hunting for Nancy Pelosi. Thankfully, they didn't find the Speaker of the House, and they realized, prosecutors argue, that the way things developed, it was not a smart idea for them to bring those weapons into the Capitol. But you're absolutely right. The text messages and the evidence in this case seems overwhelming about what the intent of those Oath Keepers was, and the defense has to argue what they have to argue.
How sharply do prosecutors have to prove either intent or some kind of connection to the Trump administration, to President Trump's inner circle, to be able to secure convictions here? I feel like in some cases, some of the January 6th defendants have really tried to make a case that they were very much in the sway of someone very persuasive that got them to do something that they ordinarily would not have done. And even the invocation of the Insurrection Act is invoking a real law. I wonder if there is some way that they might be able to make a case saying the Insurrection Act is real law. It's reasonable to think that an American citizen might follow the orders of a president invoking something that's on the books. I mean, do prosecutors have a high bar that they have to reach to make this work?
On its face, that defense seems somewhat persuasive, except for the fact that prosecutors have evidence that Stuart Rhodes talked about using that defense as a cover. Because let's not forget, Stuart Rhodes is a former Army paratrooper who graduated from Yale Law School. He's not a dummy. So the prosecutors have a lot of evidence that he took steps to sort of present this legal defense almost in advance. And then when he realized, he and other co-defendants, that the FBI was on to them, there's also evidence that Rhodes started destroying text messages and other kinds of evidence and told the Oath Keepers to stop talking and stop messaging about what happened on January 6th. So that's a real part of this case as well. In terms of the bar, they don't have to show a connection to Donald Trump. They simply have to show that there was a conspiracy to overthrow part of the government or to thwart a democratic process here, to also to interrupt a governmental proceeding, which that congressional proceeding on January 6th was. So, at the same time, there was some debate inside the Justice Department about whether to bring the seditious conspiracy charge. It's rarely brought. The DOJ hasn't gotten a conviction on it in the last 3 decades, and so they've really swung for the fences here. Losing this case would be very, very bad for the DOJ.
Yeah, a big case and a fascinating case for lots of reasons. Thank you, Ken. That's NBC Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian. The Supreme Court opened its new term today with a historically diverse bench of justices. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson sat for her first day of oral arguments. She is the first black woman to serve on the Supreme Court. This is also the first time 4 women have sat on the bench together. But all 9 justices are in for a busy term. Cases on affirmative action and voting and religion and free speech and LGBTQ rights are on the docket. Last term brought some controversial decisions, including the overturning of Roe v. Wade and establishing a right to carry guns outside the home. And the American public's faith in the judicial system seems to be slipping, at least according to a new Gallup poll. It shows that nearly 60% of Americans say they disapprove of the way the Supreme Court is handling its job. That's the highest disapproval rating in 20 years. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas joins us now to talk about what's happening with the court. Danny, give us some of the big cases you're watching this term.
Affirmative action in schools, a hot topic for decades now, since a major ruling in 2003. Voting Rights Act is possibly on the chopping block. It's already been on the chopping block. It's been arguably eviscerated in the last several years. What remains of it may not be around for much longer. So we have those 2 major cases. You see also we have the refusal to create websites for same-sex weddings, hearkening us back to an earlier Supreme Court case where it was about cake making. Now we may be talking about the same thing when it comes to website making. I imagine that prior case is going to be a substantial precedent in this case. So we have a lot of really interesting cases on the docket this year.
The court heard a case today challenging the federal government's authority to regulate wetlands under an environmental protection law. But this case is about more than just regulating wetlands. Like, there's a larger, I think, political thread that runs through it, right?
Of course there is. I mean, in a lot of these cases, it's about the size of the agency power to regulate beyond that which may be granted to it under the federal statute. So this is always a hot topic and always a very political topic, but one that came up very early, along with, I might add, the MyPillow Mike Lindell rejection, which also came out today as well.
These cases, though, they touch on something that is a legitimate legal question, right? Like, where does the power of the federal government stop in terms of, you know, Congress passes a law that gives a federal agency the power to make regulations under its authority, and they have to kind of stay within the lines. But then there's also been this political argument about the so-called administrative state, which is tied very much to Steve Bannon and other conservative commentators.
And Justice Gorsuch.
And Justice Gorsuch.
I might add.
So we do have some indication, I wonder if we do, of how the court might view these legal arguments in terms of how much power the federal government does have?
It seems to me that paring down the administrative state would be something this court, in particular, would be highly likely to do. And Justice Gorsuch alone has written about it in opinions, I believe, calling it, you know, the administrative behemoth is the word that he used. And the idea is that when these executive branch agencies, when they create law, that law, through regulations, through the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, it is not made through legislative enactment. It's not made through representative government. It's made by some guy in an office who writes a regulation. And yeah, they have to submit it for review and all, but it's essentially lawmaking without the democratic process. Often a quietly very controversial issue, and one, by the way, that governs our lives far more than some of the other social issues that make their way to the court.
How do we see the political balance of the court factoring this time? I mean, Chief Justice John Roberts has often taken the middle ground in the court, and I think if we look at the totality of what the Supreme Court does, they often tend to rule on things 7-2, 8-1, possibly 9-0. We see the most controversial cases that come down to more of an ideological split, but how do we think that that split might play into this term?
It depends on the case. When it comes to the administrative state, look for Justice Gorsuch to rail against it. Now, you may be surprised, Justice Roberts, an institutionalist, a centrist vote now in this modern court, has already spoken on the issue of race. So those affirmative action cases, look for him to side against affirmative action and possibly strike it down. He's really not been in the middle on this issue. He said in prior cases, I can't remember the site, but he said essentially, this is a sordid business, this divvying us up by race. Those were his words, and not too long ago. So look for him to be a centrist on some issues, but, you know, move to one side or the other on others.
I always worry about, and I know I just asked you about this, but I always worry about asking about the politics of the court because, you know, the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg used to talk about how courts will often do things that we don't quite intend. She talked about how William Rehnquist moved on some of his views over time. And, you know, even the case about LGBTQ rights, you know, Justice Gorsuch wrote that opinion in terms of existing federal law protecting LGBTQ people out on the job. So there's all kinds of room for things to happen that we may not expect, even though this Gallup poll, 42% of Americans think the Supreme Court is too conservative, 38% think that it's about right. Both of those are within the margin of error, so it's kind of, I guess, nip-tuck in terms of what the American people think. I don't know. I guess I'm just wondering how much we should just let the court do its job and not try to guess what's going to happen based on somebody's supposed politics.
I have some bad news for you. The Constitution would probably say about that Gallup poll, who cares? Why do I say that? And I'm not being glib. The reality is the Constitution designed the court to not care about polls. They appointed the justices for life for a reason, so that when you carry your sign and protest out front of the Supreme Court, they don't care. They're not influenced by that, and hopefully they're not influenced by corporations or anything else. They're supposed to be, I said hopefully,
right.
But they're supposed to be cloistered in that Supreme Courthouse, unaffected by outside pressure. Did it work? I don't know. But when you tell me that there are polls that say people are not happy with the justices, if the justices are doing their job, they shouldn't care.
Yeah, and that's the open question, I think, for a lot of people, whether or not they're doing that or what the influence is. And by the way, I think the case you were trying to reference, one of our producers just brought, yeah, the way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. That's what Justice Roberts wrote in a 2007 ruling. This is going to be a fascinating turn.
Oh, yes.
We might have you back once or twice.
You better. I demand it.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. We will get to some of today's other top stories in just a moment, including some major battlefield victories for the Ukrainian army and a new NBC News poll on the shifting views of Latino voters. Russian troops are retreating from some territories in Ukraine. It hasn't been long since they claimed 4 territories. Ukrainian forces have reclaimed the eastern city of Liman. They also pushed past a Russian line of defense in the southern region of Kherson. But you wouldn't know it to hear the narrative from the Kremlin. NBC's Jay Gray has the latest from Kyiv. Jay, good evening.
Good evening. And look, according to Ukrainian officials, it's been another good day for the counteroffensive. They are moving in both to the east and to the south, taking several villages and towns as they continue to move in and reclaim this territory that in some cases has been occupied by Russian soldiers for months. There's been no word from the Kremlin and specifically Vladimir Putin with regards to how well these Ukrainian forces are getting into these areas and pushing back the Russian troops. We have heard from the Ministry of Defense that does acknowledge that their troops are withdrawing in many of these areas, but there's an uneasy silence over the last couple of days, especially after the statements from the Kremlin that they were going to use whatever means necessary to protect citizens that they said would be citizens of Russia forever. And so there is concern on the ground here in Ukraine among those watching this unfold about what could come next, especially with the threats of using strategic nuclear weapons if necessary. So that's something they're watching very closely. But again, it's clear here in Kyiv that Ukrainian officials aren't worried about any referendum. They aren't worried about those threats. They are continuing to push forward with the counteroffensive. Back to you.
That's NBC's Jay Gray reporting from Ukraine. Well, this war has turned millions of Ukrainians into refugees. Tens of thousands came to the U.S. One refugee, named Yana, is just 8 years old. She and her family hid in a bunker and slept in train stations when Russia invaded. Today, Yana's life looks a lot different. She's in New Jersey, and she's starting the 3rd grade. NBC's Julia Ainsley has her story.
8-year-old Yana and her family fled Ukraine and escaped to Poland last March, desperate to reunite with family in the United States.
Yes, it's very hard.
Once struggling for food, today Yana is the newest member at Little Brook Elementary School in Princeton, New Jersey. She's one of more than 62,000 Ukrainians the Biden administration says it has let in under a program launched in April.
Hey, Yana, how are you? Are you good? Ready for the day?
Yana's father, Albert, recounts how their lives were upended when Russia invaded Ukraine.
You don't know if you will wake up or not. You want to eat, but you can't. After, you run into the basement because every minute or 5, you have a siren going on. And this was not a very desirable situation for us to stay in.
The family left everything they knew, relying on the kindness of strangers. They escaped to Moldova and eventually to Poland. From there, Yana's aunt, who works at Princeton University, helped sponsor the family through an arduous process that helps Americans bring Ukrainians to the United States.
Hi, Yana. Good morning.
Now, Yana shows us around her new school. Each morning, Yana begins the day in her new 3rd grade class with circle time, where the students share something about themselves. Today, she's teaching her class how to say hello in Russian.
In Russian, why don't you tell the class nice and loud how we say that? Привет. Привет. Can we practice it? Привет.
Привет. On the playground, Yana tells us she's making friends already.
Do you like New Jersey?
Yeah.
Yeah?
At school 7 and friends, 2 friends speak Russian.
What do you all do to make Yana feel welcome here?
We help her, I translate.
Raise your hand if you made a snake. Hold it.
Yana's teacher says the children in the class had been eager to help Yana find her way and settle into her new school.
Why do you think we see that from kids this age?
Kids this age are innocent. And And they want to be friends. They want to help each other. And that's why I love this age.
She says she has to find a balance between telling her students where Yana comes from while also protecting them from knowing too much about the horrors of war. The Princeton community has come together to provide free dental work, clothes, toys, bikes, and more. Janet Cohen is a recent retiree who has volunteered her time to teach English to Yana's family.
It's extremely rewarding in so many ways.
That was NBC's Julia Ainsley reporting. Up next, a breakthrough report points to widespread abuse in women's soccer. We'll have more on its findings just ahead. Stay close. What issues are motivating Latino voters in this year's midterm elections? That depends on who you ask. Latinos are definitely not a monolith. And that really shows in our new NBC News Telemundo poll. NBC national political correspondent Steve Kornacki breaks down the data.
Really interesting numbers here because it gets at a big question that was raised by the 2020 election. We saw Donald Trump do much better with Latino voters in 2020 than he had done in 2016. And we said, well, is that something that's going to continue into the future? So we did hear NBC News and Telemundo, a poll of Latino voters, some really good data here. And take a look at it this way, a couple ways here of looking at it. But first, Joe Biden's popularity among Latino voters. He does have just barely here above 50% approval rating, 51-45. Compare that to voters overall in our most recent NBC poll. It's a little better. Biden's doing a little bit better with Latino voters, but not that much better. 51 versus 45 with voters overall. Where it really starts to get interesting is on this issue, though, of the generic congressional ballot. When you ask folks, do you want the Democrats or the Republicans to be running Congress here? Among Latino voters in this poll, we do show Democrats ahead by 21 points. And you might look at that and say, it's a pretty good lead for Democrats. Well, here's the context for that 21 points. If you look at the 2020 election, Biden versus Trump, it was 21 points. And the 2020 election was the election where Donald Trump did much better with Hispanic voters than anyone was expecting. Because if you went back to 2016, Hillary Clinton's margin with Latinos was 38. Came all the way down to 21 for Biden in 2020. And look, it is still at 21. So the margin we're finding in this poll right now is on the level with the margin that Biden was kept to by Donald Trump in 2020. So the question that was raised by 2020 was, would this continue? Our poll suggests it may well be, and there could be big implications for that, obviously, when you start looking at particularly some key House races, some South Texas, California, some other places, some Senate races in Arizona, Nevada. Also, one thing that's emerging here among Latino voters here, we see this among white voters, and we're starting to see this among Latino voters, a divide based on gender and educational attainment. Latino voters who do not have college degrees and are male only favor the Democrats by 8 points. College-educated male Latinos, Democrats by 15. Latino women without college degrees, Democrats by 28. College-educated Latino women, Democrats by 35. You see that number get bigger and bigger as you go up the degree chain there and go from men to women. We see a similar dynamic when you're looking at white voters, too. So that now starts to become an element, it looks like, when you're looking at the Latino vote, one of the reasons it's becoming more competitive politically.
A lot of variety in that support. That's NBC's Steve Kornacki with the numbers. The U.S. governing body for soccer says reforms are coming in response to a damning investigation of abuse in the sport. The catalyst for this was a probe of women's pro soccer. The report described systemic abuse at all levels. Former Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates led the investigation.
So let's be clear what we're talking about here. This is not a case of tough coaching or players being overly sensitive. We're talking about sustained, degrading, and manipulative conduct that was all about power, not about enhancing a player's performance. Those who were in a position to make a difference didn't. Ultimately, the failure to respond to player complaints created the impression that some forms of misconduct are just normal, and even beyond that, acceptable.
Some players reported abuse that started in youth soccer. We'll dig more into this report and more very soon. But we'd love your questions or stories about abuse in soccer. Hopefully this has never affected you or your family, God forbid. But if it has, feel free to share your story. We're at NBC Now Tonight on social media, but of course you can reach out much more privately by leaving us a direct voicemail, 888-575-2NBC. Please let us know if there are personal details we should leave out. You can also email us nowtonight@nbcnews.com. Till we meet again, I'm Joshua Johnson. See you tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.